The world is constantly telling us to live our authentic self, but we can get confused about what that is and where to even find that.
We're all struggling to figure out, what's authentic? What is even real?
What is even real?
There are so many fakes that are out there, but now we're really in a position where we're really trying to fool each other.
But since everyone's doing it, it seems normal. So how do you know that's real because everyone else is doing it? That's one of the big things I think is huge in finding authentic purpose.
We're starting to build on these authenticating markers, these pillars of purpose. And so we've talked about service. No matter what we do, whatever God is calling us to, whatever the world would even call you to, right, is always going to be defined by service. So service has a posture to it, and it becomes the posture of our purpose. Now we've looked at experiences. Experiences really help us develop the perseverance that we're going to need because life's not easy, and we know that. We might be lulled to sleep thinking it sometimes, but we know we got to be able to do a hard thing, and that hard thing helps us get better, but it also develops our perseverance. The last conversation we talked about our passions, like this academic pursuit of knowledge, that whenever you start to get interested in something, you start to get excited about it, you start to get passionate about it. And when you start getting passionate about it, you want to know more. And so we looked at our purpose of whatever this thing is that I'm created for, this authentic purpose in my life, I'm going to serve it, I'm going to persevere in it, and I'm going to be passionate about it. And that brings us to our last conversation together, talking about authentic purpose, and that's the pillar of leadership. Now, I think we find in David, ultimately, we've been talking about his life from shepherd to king, from service to leadership. And when we look at our lives and our authentic purpose, I think all of us are destined for leadership. You just maintain a posture of service, but you pick up a position of leadership. And I think we find this in his life. I think we can find it in the lives of others, that as these pillars start to line up, leadership is ultimately the destination. And whether it's in basketball or being a mother or in the home or being out of college or working, I think God has for us this desire for us to influence. We talked about influencers. God has also created some influencers as well.
So what does servant leadership look like? That word of tying service with leadership, because I think that's really key. Like, what does servant leadership look like? And one, we can go for the world. Like, what would you think servant leadership would look like in the world? Like, what does the world say about that?
Man, that's an interesting thought. The way the world would look at leadership.
It would not be as a servant. It would not.
Yeah, it would be.
It would just be, how can I control it? How can I manage it? How can I be in charge and do what has to be done?
And we talked about stacking successes before in a conversation. Leadership would just be the culmination of, I got this, I earned this. Oh, yeah. And so a lot of times I think the world would see leadership as something that I've earned, that I've now over everyone.
You rise to it, you ascend, you work your way up.
Yeah, speak to that, right? I mean, this idea of climbing the ladder or something.
I mean, that's, I don't know, I was just thinking of, this is a really old show, but the Jeffersons, working my way to the top. And
moving on up.
Finally get a piece of the pie,
Yeah, we're moving on up, right?
So it's just, I've earned this. This is mine now. I worked hard, and now this is what I get as a reward, is to be the leader.
I think, speaking to this in the way the world sees leadership in that position, that's something that I go get. It's something that I've earned. It's something that I demand. Some people demand those things. But what we find in the kingdom, and what we even find with King David, it's completely different. Yeah. It's not the same. It's not something that you reach for. It's ultimately something that you submit to when it comes to leadership.
And within that submission, I think, like, what the world says and versus what biblically is saying and what we get to be able to, that's revealed to us. I think the biggest concept is, I find it ironic because in the world's stature of what leadership is, it's like, I am this person, I deserve this respect because I am the leader. But look at Jesus, look at David. As soon as that leadership role was ascended upon him, they're going back to serving them in instances, you know, like for example, what you said, like him being a leadership about bringing them sandwiches before the fight of David and Goliath,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, like that's crazy because I feel like in today's world, I'm not saying in the world today there's not good leaders, but that is the status quo of today, is in leadership outside of biblically speaking is completely different. It's a completely different subject of what, especially Jesus. I mean, he was a leader of the disciples, but he's the one washing their feet.
Exactly. And when we look at that example that he's given us, and even through his own very own words, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Like, so if you're a leader and you've risen to the level of leadership, congratulations, you've now put yourself at the bottom of everyone. It's an upside down world where in leadership in the kingdom, you place everyone above you and you're working to serve that whole group that you've now become responsible for.
Yeah, and he became, I mean, going back to David, he became trusted because of the experiences he went through, because of how he served people. I mean, that wasn't just, the leadership wasn't just thrown at him. I mean, he earned it. I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I mean, leadership isn't something that just is ascended upon you because of, you might have this aura of being a leader. No, he went through things to put him in a position to become the authentic purpose of what he's supposed to be as a leader through those experiences. And that's key.
Well, when you look at Saul had the aura.
Yeah.
Saul had the aura
Yeah.
of leadership, and it was a disaster. But when it comes to the way that the kingdom works, and when God reveals, verse in Revelation, meaning through the process of revelation, he's like, this is what I want you to do. This is what I have for you. The world gets excited about vision. God has always revealed to us, his children, what it is that he wants us to do. And we find that through scripture. Leadership actually becomes something you don't end up ascending to or have a vision for. It's really something that God reveals to you
Placed on you. Even.
through a process.
Or like it's placed on you, right? Like David didn't choose to be the king. He just was, he was told, this is what you're going to do.
And then developed.
Yeah, and developed
that.
into it.
I mean, when you think about the moment that he was anointed to be king.
Yeah, he was still a shepherd.
And the day he put a crown on his
Yeah.
head. There's a lot of life that happened between those things. The very next thing is, and we find this in our lives, someone serves and helps. You're like, hey, thank you for doing that. And then they do it a little bit longer. They persevere in it. And you're like, you're so good at that. And they get passionate. Next thing you know, you're going, hey, do you mind just taking that over? Do you mind leading that? They only came for service, but they left in leadership. Now, how do you keep this balance between the servant leader concept? Well, you maintain a posture of service in a position of leadership. And if you ever back out of that, if you ever go, boy, that's hard to hold that posture, and you ever puff out in the world when it talks about leadership, they puff out, chest comes out, real proud. Yeah. As soon as you do that, you lose your posture. Yeah. And then ultimately you'll lose your effectiveness in your leadership.
Well, for the kingdom.
Especially for the kingdom.
Yeah.
I think God has leadership for every one of us. He certainly has a purpose for every one of us. Now, how would I take basketball and how would that ever become an authentic purpose for me in my life or for you in your life? I think when you see yourself serve with the game, when you obviously know how to do hard things and persevere, you've been marked by that. You become passionate about the game. Well, your passion and knowledge about the game might actually be not just what you can consume, but through leadership, all of a sudden, what can you give?
That's huge, because I mean, what I'm trying to do with my brand and Outlier is, how can I tie the game of what you said about giving back to those kids? Because if I don't have enough time to be able to spread what I've learned with this knowledge, and now I'm in a position of leadership to be able to give back, how am I going to walk into the things that Christ already had prepared for me? You know, how am I going to do that?
If I think of Chris Woods, the influencer, what's your Instagram look like? If you're Chris Woods, the influencer, you have a certain posture. You have a certain way you look. When you're Chris Woods, the leader, it looks different. Your time is spent different. Your content is different. Because one of these things as an influencer is everybody look at me while I look to the world.
Do you not think that you can be an influencer and be a servant leader? Or do you think?
Oh, I think you do. Absolutely.
You can be both.
Yeah.
I think you can.
It's just a posture. What's your posture for it? So
what are you influencing?
What are you influencing?
What is the influence?
One, are you being
right?
genuine too in it, or are you being, what did you call it?
Counterfeit?
Virtue signal. Oh, counterfeit. Are you being counterfeit? What are you?
Yeah, I think for you to ultimately discover your authentic purpose, and if you were to think, I think basketball is a part of that. Well, you already know the game and you know the hard parts of it. The thing that you're actually experiencing right now and you're stumbling around in is this desire to serve in it and to give back and to lead and mentor. And for you, that might be, I haven't done that before. That's new to me. I don't know how this is going to work yet. I'm not sure I have all of it figured out, which is different than Chris Woods, the influencer that says, look at me because I'm amazing. Look at me because I'm awesome. And let me give you likes and let me give you things, and which is different than let me influence you in Christ. You see something in me you want to emulate. Yeah. I accept that. I receive that. But only in watch me as I imitate Christ. That is your servant leader. Yeah. So I can still influence. It's just my influence looks completely different. I am now not putting the mirror up to what the world sees and look at how I look with the world. It's now look at me as I'm looking to Christ. I'm reflecting Him. You're reflecting me while I reflect Him.
And that's going to point to somebody. That's going to point, by you doing that, is going to point the finger to Christ to hopefully draw their attention to what truly matters, not what the world sees.
And then it starts them on an authentic journey.
And it just keeps traveling. Yeah.
Because if I can be excited about the game and you starting to tell me about Jesus, and then I'm like, who's this guy? What is this thing? And you say something and it ignites that passion for a second. Now I want to know. Now I'm back into that pillar of knowledge. I'm learning how to do hard things because I'm watching Chris. He's telling me the hard things I got to do. And now Chris is telling me I got to serve. I got to serve too. I thought I just got to play. Now you're starting to put me into purpose, right? And I think these are the pillars that we're finding. Certainly David, he never took the kingdom for himself. It was handed to him because he served well. He did hard things. He was passionate about God. It was God's kingdom. It was God's people. And then he led well. Now, when you look at the times that he failed, anytime that he failed as a leader, he lost posture. Mm-hmm. Even the story of David Bathsheba that we were talking about, he was to go out. Normally it was the time when the men go out to war, when they go out to the battle. He lost his posture in that moment. He had done that and he got bored of it. He's like, I don't know if I need to lean forward and bend and do that. And out of that posture, all of a sudden, temptation found him.
So when we find ourselves asking, like for example, my age, what are these steps that I need to take to be able to find my authentic purpose?
Well, I think you come back to those 4 pillars, and then you're looking at service, experience, academics, and leadership. And the question is, well, what's there and what's missing? So that's how I think if you're a young person putting it together, where am I serving? Can I do hard things? Where am I persevering? Where am I failing in that? What do I even care about? What am I passionate about? Find those places and you'll be well on your way to your authentic purpose.
Many of you are probably called into ministry. Well, at least one of you. I'd say at least one of you in the room. If there's 2 of you sitting in the room, I'd say one of you is probably gifted with the skills and abilities that God needs for you to serve His church. Full-time, part-time, half-time, sometimes. And I think a lot of times we talk about ministry as something not for everyone. And that term gets overused because, yeah, it's true. Not everybody is called into ministry. Not everybody is supposed to be a pastor or a preacher or a missionary or a leader in the church, but we are all called to be ministers of God's Word. And it might actually be the hardest thing you ever do. It might be the thing that gives you the most challenges, gives you the most headaches, brings the most anxiety, but it's probably also the thing that brings you the most joy. If you're called into ministry, there's nothing that's ever going to fulfill you except being the authentic you that you are designed to be. And so I want to encourage you, if you feel like you might have a calling on your heart for some kind of ministry, or maybe even just to learn more about the Bible so that you can share it with other people, because we're all called to do that, then I encourage you, consider Bible college as an option, because it's helped me discover who I authentically am and what my purpose in God's plan is.